Hi, it's Jen Tracy, and this is my MS story. Before I get into the story, I just wanted to tell you that I have, I didn't know that people living with MS were telling their MS stories in YouTube videos. And then I stumbled across one and I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting. And I can't remember in the moment who it was that was speaking. It was a guy, and he's been living with MS for 17 years, and he's done a series of MS videos over time around his story. And then I realized, okay, this is like a thing, right? And I thought, okay, I have a YouTube channel, so I might as well embark upon this journey in terms of telling my story. One of the things I would like to share with you before I get into the when I was diagnosed is to go back in time before that. So I'll start with the fact that I was diagnosed approximately 9 years ago. So when it comes to September of this year, it'll be 9 years. And yeah, it's interesting because I actually feel, based on where I'm at in my life right now, that the time feels like it's been much longer than 9 years. So I guess, I hope that's a good thing, right? So let me just go back before I was diagnosed. And there were some things that happened, and you may be able to relate to this because I think a lot of people that experience MS, some of you may get diagnosed right away, and others it might be years and years and years before you're diagnosed. And that can be a tough journey to be on, to not know what's going on. And then there are some people that are getting misdiagnosed. So there's complexities to this. For myself, I was at the peak of my career as a business owner, marketing strategist, professional speaker. I was actually on a speaking tour. And right before that speaking tour happened, a lot was kind of shaken up in my life. I was prepping to go away. I had an elderly dog that needed special care, so then I needed to have someone there. And I had hired a woman, and she had canceled at the last minute to check into the hospital because of mental health issues. I knew that she was sort of teetering there, but I was hoping that because she loved animals and she seemed relatively stable, that she would be there for my dog. And so I had to, all of a sudden, right before the speaking tour, find somebody else to take care of my dog. And that day, before even that happened, I was on the street in front of my house, and I was walking, and this dog that's was a cute little puppy, maybe not so little, was bounding. I saw the dog from across the street, and I guess it wasn't on a leash, it wasn't tied up. It was some neighbors that I know, and the dog came bounding across the street towards me. And right at that moment, I saw a big white truck come along, and I screamed trying to tell the truck to stop, but it didn't see the dog, and it just drove by and the dog went flying. It was very, very traumatic for me, traumatic for the family. And, we all kicked into gear to strategize how to deal with that. A lot of people in the neighborhood came together, and I recommended my vet, and I drove them to the vet, and unfortunately, sadly, that dog didn't make it. So, I was in a high state of trauma right before going away on this business trip. And the other thing I noticed, which was really strange, was I felt so tired. Now, this business trip was in September. I had taken holidays in August, and even though I had been active, I had been sleeping a lot, and I didn't really understand why. I just thought, oh, I must be working a lot. I'm really tired. I mean, my career was going so well, and I was working 12-hour days pretty much. Like I wouldn't say I was a workaholic necessarily, but I was really into what I was doing. And so I just was a mess. And then a couple days before the trip happened as well, I noticed that when I grabbed grabbed a pen. It was like one of those big jumbo pens. And I was trying to write something on a pad. It was a note that I was writing. I don't even know why I was doing that, but I guess maybe a note to myself. And I noticed that it was really hard to hold on to the pen. And I just thought, oh, well, it's a big jumbo pen. Of course I can't hold on to it. Denial, denial, denial. So I leave on this business trip. It's 3 days intensive. Like I fly in at 8 o'clock at night. I get picked up. I go to the room to set up the room, and also to, what was happening during that time? Set up the room for the next day for this presentation I was doing. My background's in marketing, so I was talking about a 5-step marketing process, and it was for a client for 3 cities that I was going to. So the next morning, get up early, do the presentation. We get in the car, we drive. Thankfully, I didn't have to drive to the next location, which was, I don't know, it was at least 2.5 hours away, maybe longer. Have lunch, and then do a presentation in the afternoon. And then we drove, got into the next location, and I had a late dinner, and basically got up the next morning. So what happened was, I was like, wow, my energy's really low. And at that time I was running. So I decided that the morning of the, was it the morning of the first or the second presentation? I think it was the morning of just before the third presentation. I thought, I'm going to get up early and I'm going to go for a run. So I get out there and I'm jogging, and my left leg is dragging. So I had the problem with my hand, which actually I noticed was getting worse on the business trip, where I could barely write, which was very challenging. And then I got my dragon leg, which was weird. I mean, it didn't hurt, so no pain. I'm like, okay. And by the time I did the third presentation, I had to stand behind a table, and with the audience, there was a small group, maybe 15 people, and just so I could kind of hide behind it. It was weird, I didn't know what it was. When I flew back home, I noticed the next morning when I woke up that my leg was, well, not my leg, my left lip was dragging, drooping like this. And I was like really freaked out. So I'm like calling my naturopath, and I'm calling my chiropractor, and I went in to see both of them. And I'm like, listen, I know I've really burnt myself out. I need, something's going on here. They both worked on me, and they said, something's going on in your neck. If nothing changes, come back and see us on Monday. So that was fine. So I slept a lot. Like I just slept. And then I had a commitment to be with some friends to go see a play. And as I'm coming to the lineup to the play, which is outside, it was at a festival that was happening, my friend Yuvina says to me, Jen, what's going on with your leg? I'm like, I told you, like my leg's not working so well, my hand's not working. Now my lip is like drooping. And she's like, well, you need to go to emergency. I'm like, Yuvina, you work for a hospital. You're just being like biased here, right? Biased. So basically, she said, no, you really need to go. So I said, well, let's go to the play first. We paid for our tickets. So we went to the play. There was 4 of us. And after the play was over, I said, let's grab something to eat. I'm really hungry. You hungry? So I went for something to eat. And then I realized, then I thought, okay, I better go to emergency. And, never go to emergency before you've had a meal, because you might be there all night before things happen, right? So what happened when I got there was they fast-tracked me. And so I think I arrived at the hospital, I don't know, it was maybe like 10 a.m. at night. It was like the play was earlier in the like late afternoon kind of thing. And by midnight, they had done a CT scan, and by 1 o'clock in the morning, they had moved me into a holding pen area, just where they have curtains in between the beds. And I was like, okay, well, that's great, but why am I here? So I went up to the nursing station. I'm like, excuse me, okay, well, I don't know what's happening, but can I go home now? And she's like, no, we have to page a neurologist in the morning and they'll probably come in at 8 o'clock. Well, okay, that did not happen, but anyway, this is Canada that I'm talking about here. And so around noon the next day, the neurologist came in, and she was such a nice lady. I loved her, she's great. And she's like, well, you've got inflammation of the brain. Now, she did not tell me that she was speculating multiple sclerosis, because she wanted me to have an MRI. So they admitted me to the hospital so that I could wait for the MRI. And she told me that after the MRI, based on the findings, that they would be giving me some kind of medicine, some steroid drip or something. I didn't know actually at the time what it was, to get the inflammation down in my brain as quickly as possible. So I felt relieved. I'm like, okay, like everything's been taken care of here. I'm good. I'm in good hands. And she said, oh, by the way, I'll be your neurologist after, after you get out of the hospital, but I'm away for a week, so you'll have Dr. So-and-so, whoever that person was. And I'm like, okay, great. So I get a room. I'm sharing with somebody. I'm actually sharing with a guy who had infections, and he had to have drip for that. And I didn't realize it, but he was a drug addict that had probably through needle injection, had an infection in his body, and had to go in and stay there overnight to have the drip. So that was kind of an interesting experience, having him as my roommate during that journey. The next morning, and this is a Monday morning, my friend Uvina shows up, and she's up with one of those little, I don't know, it wasn't like a wheelchair, but a little chair to bring me. She goes, I'm going to take you to your MRI. Now, the thing about Uvina that was pretty awesome is that she was in charge of all of the appointments for radiology. just circumstance. Maybe it was a good thing that I went to the hospital that she worked at, right? Because she found a cancellation and got me in first thing in the morning on that Monday. At the same time, my sister was flying in, or not flying, but taking a ferry in from an island where she lived and coming into the hospital. So by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there were 3 doctors. This hospital is a training hospital for other doctors. So the main neurologist, and I can't remember his name, but he's an expert of many seasoned years, came in with 2 residents doctors, and they all lined up at the door, so probably so they could leave quickly, and told me that 99% chance that I had multiple sclerosis, and they wanted to check and see where I was at with they wanted to confirm it, but they basically wanted to do a lumbar puncture first. And I know those can be kind of risky. So I said to the doctor, and my sister was sitting there in the room at that point. So I had a witness, which was good. I'm so glad that I had someone there at that point in time. And I said to this neurologist, well, can you do the lumbar puncture? Or I said, actually, no, my first question was, do you have experience with lumbar punctures? He said, yes, 20 years experience. And I'm like, great, can you do this? And he said, oh, no, I don't have time. Don't have time to do that. I'm like, okay. So I was actually reticent to get this lumbar puncture done, truthfully. So what happened was, the next day, a resident doctor came in and approached me, and he said, you know what, Dr. whatever his name is, we'll do the lumbar puncture on you as long as you can, as long as we can bring in a whole pile of students to watch it as a training. And I'm like, yes, because I want the guy that did the lumbar punctures for 20 years to be doing this for me. I was very happy. And the way that he did it was amazing. Had an audience, I don't know, 5 or 6 people. It was done right there in my hospital room, in my bed. And it was painless. I have to say that I did have a sore back for a couple months after it happened. And I think it was the next day, even before they got the results back, they just gave me that steroid drip. And truthfully, if any of you have been on steroid drip, please write your comments below. If you've ever had a lumbar puncture, please write your comments and experience below as well, or any of the symptoms that I'm describing. because day one was okay, although I didn't sleep that first night. I was sobbing. Uh, my roommate came to me because he was going out for a cigarette, and he said, "Would you like me to get you a chocolate bar?" It was so sweet. He just wanted to make me feel better. And I said, "No, actually, I think that would push me, the sugar would push me over that edge, you know." So I just, I felt very alone, actually. And I think now that I'm recounting, this is what it's like 9 years later. That was the second night, because the first night I was laying in bed and I was thinking, I don't know anything about multiple sclerosis. And, as someone who likes to get out there and travel and speak, I thought, maybe this will be hard at first, but then maybe eventually I'll be able to be an inspirational speaker and do something like tell my story, right? I thought that'd be kind of cool. And also I was reflecting on the fact that I had purchased this insurance, critical illness insurance, which was a lump sum money I could get for some trauma. But I didn't know if multiple sclerosis was on the list, because in my mind, multiple sclerosis wasn't on my radar. So, so the next day when my sister came in with that insurance policy, and I cracked it open and I'm scanning the list for all 32 different conditions, there was multiple sclerosis. And I felt a sense of relief from that, like that little safety blanket. I didn't know what was ahead of me in terms of my journey. I really didn't. And, probably a good thing that I didn't know at that time, certainly. So basically, yeah, that's, so the second night is when I've been on steroid drip for 2 days now. And that's when I was feeling like horrible. And I told one of the resident doctors, I said, listen, these steroids are making me feel crazy. And he's like, no, it's just the diagnosis. It's the diagnosis. And I'm like, no, dude, this is not the diagnosis. I know my own body. This is the steroids. I feel angry. I feel like the Incredible Hulk. I can't sleep. But I'm pumped up and I'm crazy. And it was just like, it was, rate your comments below, please. I want to hear your experience too. So I'm very conscious of the fact that this video is already at 17 minutes. So I'll just say this, and then I think what I'll do is I'll do a part 2. Sound good? So what happened was I did leave the hospital. Like, they just shipped me off 3 days after the steroid drip was done. I know some people come in for it, but I guess they kept me there because they wanted to monitor me because of my extreme situation with the left side of my body. And truthfully, just from resting and also the steroids, I mean, it really did solve my physical disability that had happened so quickly, that may have been brewing for goodness, who knows how long, right? So that was great. So I'll wrap up this part 1 of my MS story with just saying that one thing that happened was, of course, I got home and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't going to get to see my neurologist for 3 months. I was freaked out. I was given some information about MS, but truthfully, that's when the big D, the big D of denial happened for me. I thought, well, the steroids are causing the fatigue. I didn't realize that I would then be swamped with fatigue, and then that would become a part of my life in a way that I had not experienced before. So that was a shocker. And also someone that was close to me in my life at that time who was also traumatized. I mean, a lot of people were traumatized by my situation, and I didn't have the bandwidth to really notice or have empathy for them. There was a fear of me ending up in a wheelchair. Maybe some of you have also felt that way. Some of you may be in a wheelchair now or using a walker or a cane. I was terrified, right? And so my way of dealing with that was not thinking about it, just getting on with my life, which was pretty hard in the beginning. So that's part 1. I'll come back and share part 2. Again, I'm Jen DeTracy. I hope that you comment below. And also, just so you know, down below, I've also included a link to a new Facebook group that I've started called Women Living with MS and Fatigue. You can find it. It's a private group on Facebook. And that is a group, a community that I am just starting to build at this point to connect with other women and share how we can live with MS and fatigue and still have a meaningful life, how we can thrive. So if you're interested in that, check that out, and I'll see you in part 2.